You're live.
I hope so.
Brenda will be back. She had to do an inspection.
Welcome to the May 4th, 2023 meeting of the Lyman Planning Board. This meeting will come to order. This is a public proceeding unless the board specifically votes to go into executive session. You have the right to hear everything that is being said and look at all the exhibits that are offered. If the board votes to go into executive session, the reasons for the same shall be stated. Please notify the board chair if you are having difficulty seeing or hearing. This meeting is being recorded for YouTube. In each instance, the burden is upon the applicant to demonstrate compliance with the provisions of the applicable ordinance or ordinances. After the board votes on the merits of each project, it will prepare a written opinion which will be forwarded within 7 days. The board works from a prepared agenda and will be considering tonight's items in the following order. MX 207 plans to address concerns and conditions listed during the 4/5/23 planning board meeting. Sidewalk set for Wednesday, May 10th, 2023 at 5:30 p.m. Brookview Estates, Brock Road Cluster Subdivision, Tax Map 1, Lot 12-1, 10 residential lots. Review site walk held on 4/29/23. CEO discussion of subdivision regulations. Please note there will be a workshop on Wednesday, May 24th, 2023 at 5:30 p.m. with Lee J. Feldman from SMPDC to learn more about the LD 2003. Minutes and review minutes of the public planning board meeting, and old business and mail. All right, is somebody here from MX 207?
They are not here tonight. I think that they were waiting until after next week's sidewalk,
Okay,
and there was nothing new that came in over the last 2 weeks. So we'll push them on to the next meeting.
okay, I'm good with that.
I thought so.
Us too.
Move you up a step.
All right, so Brookview Estates.
Sorry, George. This is watching review. Oh, I'm fine.
Oh, no, she's got, I'm good, I want to watch on the board. It's
Oh, I'm
already
sorry.
embedded in my brain.
Could we please do a roll call?
Sure thing.
Kelly Demers, 10 Partridge Way.
Joe Wagner, 26 Day Road.
Don Hernan, 33 Murphy's Way.
Rod T2, 357 Walker Road.
Cecile Dupuy, 53 Chapel Shores Road.
Paul Boucher, 88 Old Pump Road.
Bill Single, 8 Single Lane.
Set?
Yep.
All right. Hello again. Nice to see you all. I'm Kendra Ramsell, civil engineer. I'm here representing Mason Property Services LLC. He's the applicant. And we've been here twice to do a sketch plan review about 6 months ago, I think. And then 2 weeks ago, we submitted our preliminary subdivision application for a 10-lot cluster subdivision off of Brock Road. Just to recap, it was just last Saturday, but just to recap, the parcel has frontage on both Brock Road and South Waterboro Road. We're proposing 10 cluster lots on the Brock Road side of a stream that bisects the property. We're proposing 40 acres of open space on the opposite side of the stream. And then further north, we are proposing a roughly 25 acre parcel of retained land, or land to be retained by the owner. That is the portion that has frontage, that will have frontage on South Waterboro Road.
So technically, this is an 11 lot subdivision.
There's
Yes,
been a
it is.
lot of discussion on that. We've spoken quite a bit with Southern Maine Planning Services as well as Brenda, CEO, and we can get into further discussion on that. Do you want to talk about that now, or do you want to talk about the site walk first?
Well, we talked about the 11 lot subdivision.
Sure. So I'll just note that based on our density calcs, 11 lots are allowed if
Correct.
the board chooses to call this an 11 lot subdivision. However, under Maine state law, the applicant is allowed to retain land. He is restricted with that land. If he divides it within 5 years, he has to come back and amend the subdivision lot. So there are, I wonder if maybe we're kind of jumping into Hannah's comments as well as discussion on this. But essentially, if it is by state law, if it is labeled specifically land retained by applicant, owner, whatever, Mason Property Services LLC, it is allowed to be just that, land retained. And we have provided, so what you're not seeing yet, because we haven't resubmitted revised plans after having conversations with Southern Maine Planning Services and Brenda, is that we are going to be proposing a private way off of South Waterboro Road to give what we were referring to before as the back lot. I think we've sussed out that it doesn't meet the definition of a back lot. But we have provided, we're going to build a private way to provide the proper amount of frontage. So if that under Maine state law, if that retained land meets the requirement, the dimensional standards of a lot, which it does, it's over 5 acres, and it now has the proper frontage because we're going to be proposing a right of way formally on plans. You just haven't seen them yet. It meets state law. And also I will add, under section 2.3 of your ordinance mirrors state law. It's paraphrased, I would say, but it runs parallel to how state law is presented in that,
Excuse me, is that 2.3 of the zoning ordinance or the subdivision? Right?
subdivision ordinance. Yep.
So I'm under the impression if you take one lot and make 3 lots out of it, now you have a subdivision. So you've got one lot, whether it's 10 acres or 75 acres, and you're making 11 lots.
So what, I think there's just a little bit of, I think
I mean-
how,
No, plain and simple, you're making 11 lots.
it is a lot. It
Right,
is still a lot
so
at
it's
the
part
end.
of a subdivision.
So it is the remaining land that's not being subdivided, but it has to meet the standards of a lot. If we were to consider this, here's just a couple of points for you. If we were to consider this a lot within the subdivision, we're allowed that lot, but this is a cluster lot subdivision. Cluster lots have to be under 55,000 square feet in size. This remaining land is 24 acres. So it wouldn't meet the standards of a cluster lot subdivision. But it meets the requirements of a regular lot.
Why don't you just split it off?
Josh has split one out parcel already from
So
this
it's only
land,
5
which started as 80 acres. He
Yeah.
split 5 acres off at the beginning, which I think we went over 6 months ago at
All
sketch
right,
plan.
okay, so split off 5 acres, okay. Now you've got your cluster subdivision on how many acres?
Well,
Roughly?
there's 10 lots and they're roughly an acre in size, so I think it's probably around 15 total.
Well, no, but I mean, the whole cluster subdivision is how many acres?
Probably about 15 to 20, I would say.
I think more than that.
Well, no, with the
The
open
whole
area,
With the retained land, how
The
much?
entire parcel?
You
Yeah.
gotta be
Is
talking.
75 acres total.
Okay, so, but then you've got this one you want to split off, right?
It's not, it's very important that we make the distinction that we're not splitting it off. It's, so that, from an assessor's perspective, let's say, if this goes through as a 10 lot cluster subdivision, and then you have your open space area, and then you
Right.
have your 24 acre lot, it is still a lot, it's a conforming lot, but the number of that lot would remain what it is currently, which is 12-1.
What else is on there?
There are no homes.
So you're misreading 2.3. It says in determining whether a subdivision has occurred, land retained by the subdivider or applicant for his own use as a single-family dwelling.
So Josh will continue, because it's being specifically called land retained by Nason Property Services LLC.
Correct.
It is
But it doesn't fit the criteria under 2.3 here, as there is no own personal applicant for his use as a single-family
I don't know.
dwelling for a period of at least 5 years. So in order to retain it and say it's a lot, for this, it has to have a dwelling on it.
So
Hmm.
that's not to be I'm sorry, that's not to be confused with a dwelling unit.
It
Which,
says single-family
home.
dwelling, quote unquote.
so if this land would be owned specifically by Josh,
To live on as a single-family
Well,
dwelling.
let's continue on this thing. Let her finish. I'm trying to get my head around this. Keep going, please.
so,
What's the rest of your argument?
well,
Not your argument, your discussion.
I think it's a little. I don't want it to be an argument, but
No,
it's
no,
a
go
little.
ahead.
It's semantics, right? I mean, we met with Southern Maine Planning Services this week on this topic specifically because it's a little bit complicated. What I was going to go into before is if you look at your section 2.3 of your ordinance, you have 3 paragraphs there, I believe.
Yes.
If you look at Maine state subdivision law under this topic, they also have 3 bullet points and they mirror what you're saying. However, what your ordinance does not make clear is that, and also, by the way, state subdivision law, the law that I'm referring to, is referenced in section 2.3 of your ordinance. So what I'm trying to say is that what's missing from this and that it's paraphrased is that in Maine state law, if you meet number 1, you're good. If you then go down to number 2, number 3 doesn't apply. So where you're also missing some definitions in your ordinance that also pertain to state law. So there are things, some of this is being left to interpretation. And the best way I know how to interpret that is to go back to Maine state subdivision law, where this is a legally proposed subdivision with certain stipulations. We could, I would offer and go further into my interpretation. If this were considered a lot, again, it doesn't meet cluster lot standards.
Well, don't you meet the requirements for a cluster subdivision without this lot?
Yes.
So,
Which
I
is
mean,
why it's being
maybe I'm
proposed as
missing,
remaining
I
land.
guess I'm missing the whole boat here, but is there anything illegal if the owner of this whole property splits off this chunk of X acres, I don't know how many acres it is, and goes, just gets a new deed or splits it off as a separate lot and leaves it alone?
He's
He
like
cannot
5 years.
do that within 5 years.
He's already done that. He has to wait
Uh,
5 years before he can do it again.
So he comes back in 5 years and does his budget, right?
Well,
Could do
no,
it.
no,
I'm
no,
just
no,
kidding.
no,
You don't
oh,
wanna do
God.
No, I don't think you want to do that. You don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So is there some legal way, I think we got to follow the ordinance as written, but if there's some ambiguity here, there's got to be some way to.
Was the lot that you sold a property owner in that area? Does it abut their property and they bought that?
It was just to the right of the brook that we all were standing
Yeah.
in. I sold
Mhm.
5 acres there.
Yeah, but is it somebody that lives in that area that their
They-
property abuts that?
No, they
Oh.
were renting on Wabash and they're planning on building a home on that.
Are you
Because
asking if the
If it
retaining
was an
land?
abutter that bought
Yeah.
the 5 acres, then that doesn't apply.
Yeah.
That's not considered a sale.
Um,
I don't know about that.
I'm not fault.
I
I'm
don't
not
Yeah.
think
following.
it's- Yeah.
Well, if you're gonna split it,
Yeah.
you can sell as many parcels to abutters as you want.
That don't sound quite right, though.
No, I don't-
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well,
Is that,
maybe
is
you can
that, okay,
research
that's a
that
good
for us.
question, but let's stay focused on
Yep.
what we're trying to figure.
I
I'm
was
just trying to
but
figure out, is there
It
some,
doesn't apply anyway, but that's what my question was.
is there some way we can, is there some legal way under the ordinance that the applicant can proceed with a subdivision and have that property, basically as a separate lot? I mean, that's a yes or a no, right? That's what we're looking for.
I think the confusion, and maybe it's not confusion, it's just, what are the stipulations if it is within the subdivision and if it isn't, right? So.
I mean, you could make it the 11th lot of the subdivision, is that correct? My part or
Well,
not?
actually, we can't because it's a cluster, we're allowed an
Yeah.
11th lot, but we're proposing a cluster lot subdivision which has a maximum lot size. So what, if you're,
Yeah.
I guess,
It's more than
can
an
I,
acre.
can I ask, I'm not understanding why you feel it's important for it to be within the subdivision. Is there a question that you want to ask me for reasons why it should be included in the subdivision?
Because it's all one piece of land and you're dividing 11 lots out of it.
Or if you divided 10 lots out of it, couldn't this part could be part of the common land, couldn't it? I mean,
Yes,
mean-
if, so, and that's the thing, is
but you
that,
don't want to, I mean, the developer does, I assume, does not want to do that because it's much in excess of what you have to have
that's correct.
for the 10 lot cluster subdivision, right? So, I mean, you're basically giving away a chunk of land, which has some value, either for a home or for whatever purpose. And it's accessible if you put in another road at your expense, blah, blah, blah. So the question is that legal or not? If that's illegal, let's do it. If it's not legal, let's not do it. I mean, that's my point. Maybe I'm
Brendel,
over-
yeah.
If it were in a 1 acre lot that you were, that could be part of the subdivision. And if
Say that again.
the lot is 25 acres, you're saying,
Yep.
that he wants to retain and build
We're
on.
hung up on the 11th lot.
Right,
Brenda.
if you made that 1 acre,
So we're hung up on the 11th lot.
the remaining of that 25 acres would be
Well-
a part of the subdivision and could be,
So not necessarily. So actually, the maximum lot size is not the only problem. Also, that lot, technically by your ordinance, has to have frontage on Brookview Street.
umbrella.
And it is separated by the open space. It's also separated by a stream. So in order to provide frontage on
do
Brookview
it.
Drive, we would have to cross the stream. We would have to build a road to connect it. There are several other reasons, not only that, but, and this is opinion, or I don't want to say a complaint, but also that lot would be subject to homeowners association fees, just like all the rest of the lots.
Mhm, right.
So we have land we don't know what to do with.
And that homeowners association, that lot, that 25 acre lot would also be under that umbrella.
If it was-
If
If it were considered a lot
if it
within
were
the subdivision.
right.
Yes, it would have to comply with all the,
Subdivision ordinances.
well, no,
All the
it's
homeowners
still,
association rules.
the homeowners association is different than the subdivision ordinance. This lot, if referred to as remaining land retained by the owner, still has to meet the subdivision ordinance. It just has to meet, what am I trying to say? The dimensional standards for the lot still apply. It just makes it just has to meet a regular size lot or a standard lot within the general purpose district, which it does, greater than 5 acres with the proper amount of frontage. What it changes, it's just the entire thing would actually, if it was considered a lot, either the entire subdivision would have to be reconfigured because it doesn't meet the standards of a cluster lot subdivision, or I might propose that if it was considered an 11th lot, the board may be able to add conditions of approval that lot be considered within the subdivision, but only have to meet, but not be subject to the cluster lot subdivision standards, but the standards of a regular lot. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, does that make sense?
Standards of a regular lot in a subdivision.
Yes, so I think that's,
That
That
sounds strange. I see your point. I mean, I think I see your point.
Brenda,
listening, Brenda.
Where to,
I came in on the back end of the conversation. I understand that they can't create a non-conforming lot by calling it land remaining.
Mhm.
But that's why they've offered to build a road up to town standards into that lot, so that it creates road frontage.
So that takes care of the back lot.
That takes care of
Situation.
that road. Is there another one we're talking about?
Well, but
We're
it's still
stuck
part of a
on
subdivision though.
Making it an 11th lot within the subdivision, or it being referred to as remaining land. I'd also like to point to, I don't want to add to the confusion, but to look at Southern Maine Planning Services recommendation and their summary, which addresses this issue.
Not sure about that.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
74.
I guess it's, anyway. Okay, now I see here, she says this would be retained, I guess.
I think that the question that I'm asking to the board is, knowing that section 2.3 closely mirrors but is not exact to state law.
Hmm,
And I will note again that it does reference state law and meeting those standards. Knowing that and understanding that and seeing that we're meeting state law by this being referred to as land retained by the owner on a recorded subdivision plan, I think the ask of the board is, do you agree with that interpretation? And we can write whatever you're comfortable within the conditions of approval that will be, again, put on the plan and recorded. If there's something specific that you are uncomfortable with in making this land retained by the owner, that is possible. So
Okay.
I'll stop there.
Now, we're talking about the 23.53 backlot acres that currently, as proposed, does not have sufficient road front.
As proposed in these plans currently, it does not have sufficient road frontage, which is why we were calling it a backlot before. At the last meeting, we had a lot of discussion around the definition of a backlot. And we all agree, including Southern Maine Planning Services, that that lot did not meet the definition of a backlot because,
Right, you would be creating a non-conforming lot.
right, the confusion was that there is frontage on South Waterboro Road and the definition of a backlot states that it has no frontage
Correct.
and that you need an easement over some other property in order to access it. So
Right.
it doesn't meet that definition. But I just want to be clear that since the sketch plan that we submitted way back when, we've been referring to this land as land retained by the owner always, whether it was called a backlot or not.
Right. Whatever definition you're using, or you are creating an illegal non-conforming lot because it has insufficient road frontage to meet current zoning standards.
So what you're not seeing on the plans that have been provided and what I've discussed yet,
Aha.
Is a
We have to
proposed road, which, are you looking at a private right of way? Are you looking at a subdivision road, or are you looking at a road to town standards?
So what we're proposing under the roadway, the town of Lyman roadway standards is a private way because that is allowed under those standards. So we're proposing it doesn't serve a subdivision in what we're proposing. If this is land retained by owner and we're proposing a private way, it doesn't have to be paved because it's not serving a subdivision. So, and I have a sketch for you all tonight
Yes,
so that you
please,
could
'cause I'd like to
see.
see how you propose to go across, access across the
They should
wetland.
They should all have this map which shows the proposed.
Ah,
Okay,
yes.
yes, the sketch that I submitted.
Where's that?
Nice switch craft.
So we
Just
proposed
the-
we only proposed the private way, sorry, I'm speaking to the microphone. Is it even on? We only proposed the private right of way to be long enough to provide the correct amount of frontage for the parcel. And it ended up being short enough that we did not have to cross or impact any wetlands. So the road is, I think it's roughly 280 feet long. And the frontage is 478 feet, and the required frontage would be 375 feet.
And just to interject, you said it was a private right of way, it would be a private road.
Okay.
It's not a right of way, it'd be a road.
It's not a right of way, but I believe in the ordinance it's private way. Not right of
Private
way.
way, private road,
Yeah.
Not
they're
right
pretty
of way,
synonymous.
It's
It's
specific.
Oh, all
what
right.
you're creating road
So I guess they're
frontage, but we can't
proposing
call
to
it
come in
right
here.
of way.
And also, the private way would be, still be owned by Josh. You don't need a right of way over your own land to access your own property.
Mhm.
That's another reason why it wouldn't be a right of way.
So then that just gives you access to this 24 acre or 25 acre lot, is that what you're saying?
It gives us the proper frontage required because we only have 170 feet. The original parcel only has 170 feet of frontage on South Waterboro Road. So building a road with proper length gives us 478 feet of frontage.
And I'm still gonna push the issue of single-family dwelling.
Yep.
That you referenced 2.3, in order to meet that criteria for land remaining, there has to be a single-family dwelling on that lot.
So again, I think the difference is dwelling and dwelling unit. I asked the same question to our surveyor just yesterday. And Maine state law does not consider that a dwelling unit or a home. You own it. What we're creating is just a parcel of land with that's conforming,
Oh, I see. We saw.
owned by an individual,
What's this for you?
not within a subdivision, that if he so chooses to build a home, then he so chooses to
And it
build a
states
home.
It
for
could be
his own
used as
use
a
as a
dwelling
single-family
unit.
dwelling.
Right, that's,
Whose primary use is a single family dwelling. It just
Well-
means that the property's use is for residential.
Yeah, are you interpreting that there has to be a physical?
there has to be a physical. In
Yeah.
determining whether a subdivision has occurred, land retained by the subdivider applicant for his own use as a single-family dwelling for the
Wow.
period of at least 5 years from, gotta reside there.
I think,
No, I don't think you have to reside
I
there.
can see where Kelly is coming from, because it's as though the owner has a home already on
Yeah.
the 75 acres and wants to make a subdivision.
Yeah, I see.
And
Split
just he's splitting off. He's making a subdivision with the
Oh, yeah, yeah.
remaining land that is not part of his dwelling. I guess you can interpret it either way. It's like you said, it's a little vague how,
so what you're referring to is if there was already a home there, that would be considered.
it's not his
single land.
residence. You know, he doesn't live there.
Well, there is nothing there now, right?
Right.
Correct, it's vacant
There's
land.
nothing.
Just a lot of trees and a lot of ticks.
Yeah.
No offense to the ticks.
And you've
think,
you've sold the parcel already, so that's your 5-year limit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can, the only thing else I have to offer is that, and I know that you're looking at your ordinance and that is what we should go by, of course, but in several other neighboring communities, this is done as common practice. I have 3 subdivisions in Wells where this is the case right now. We have another one we found recently in Limerick. I mean, under Maine state law, this is a common practice. And I don't know what else to offer the board
Do you have
to comfort you in that this is a legal.
Do you have the citation of the Maine state law that
I can.
possibly preempts? or
So it's
qualifies?
actually, it's listed in your,
There's a reference.
it's listed in
38.
section 2.3 of your.
Yeah, the thing is,
Well,
we're
Yeah, the
inclusive
section-
zoning, so if it's not
Sections
specifically stated that
4401.
it is included, it's excluded. So it doesn't, where it doesn't reference vacant land being broken off, it references single-family residence. My interpretation is you can't break off a large backlot that is non-residential at the time of breaking it off.
What is,
Go ahead, Brenda.
But are you breaking it off? That's the mother lot. You're splitting lots away from that. So I don't think you're splitting it. And what I just like, you've been out there, you've seen,
oh, yeah.
the fact that this portion of the mother lot is completely separated from the subdivision.
It's a budding.
But you hear what I'm saying? So, I mean, it's across wetlands, it's
Right.
behind a lot that has already been split away. So it doesn't affect the culture of that subdivision in any way. If you make that the 11th lot, now you've got to figure out, okay, the road from there across wetlands, and your utilities being underground, and it's a different situation here because it is by its own nature a very separate lot.
Mhm.
And it's not being split, everything's being split from it. It's the mother.
Yeah.
So couldn't you say that it falls under that remaining land or retained by owner, and for 5 years, unless you build your own single-family unit there, you can't do anything with it?
But in the meantime, until the road is put in,
Yeah,
if the paperwork is done for the split and the road's not put in, then you have created an illegal non-conforming lot.
That's not true because legally, there is a means of access with proper frontage. We haven't, you
Oh, I see.
can't, it's not a non-conforming lot until the road is built. We legally will have a means of access and proper frontage on paper recorded at the registry of deeds. So technically that isn't.
Well, you won't have
the
enough
case.
frontage on South Waterboro
That's
Road.
why they're gonna create the road.
I know, but until you create the road, you don't have enough frontage.
and Brenda, I really
No,
don't
but-
agree with you that being part of the mother lot, because the mother lot was the whole thing before he broke off the first piece.
But isn't that breaking it off the mother?
Now he's breaking off a second piece.
So,
Is it the chicken or the egg?
yeah.
Yeah, I
it's- We're getting, timing is important. This is happening at the same time that the rest of the land is being subdivided, which is what makes it legal under state law.
Is there any way to go forward with this, with the cluster subdivision as proposed with all this open space that's already there and you have this, 20 some acres or whatever it is of leftover land? Is there any way to put a restriction on that and say you can't do anything with it for 5 years? And then they can proceed if they want to build this road to get the proper frontage?
I think you could put restrictions on it. I don't care to see you approve a plan of this land over here that isn't identified as anything. It's just there. You're approving a plan is
Right.
what you're.
Right.
So I would want to see the plan as that is identified as to what it is with the road on the plan.
Ah,
That's what I would like to see. I'm not sure the road has to be built. I think it has to be on paper so that if they come in and they pull a permit for that 23 acres, whatever it is,
okay.
they can't pull a permit until that road is put in.
Ah,
So I don't think technically you're creating a non-conforming lot as long as you identify what it is. It can't sit there as nothing. It's either an 11th lot or it's land renewal.
I got you. So if, in that case, then the restriction would be that they really could not legally build a house on that lot until they put in the road.
It can't, but what you're saying is that you could put that as a restriction or a condition of approval on the plan, but you don't even need to because they can't get a building permit for a house until the road is constructed under those rules.
Here's a catch-22. In order to be classified by our zoning, not by state ordinance, there must be an owner-occupied single-family residence.
So
Disagree with
I
that.
disagree with that. It specifically says the use must be single-family dwelling,
Yeah,
meaning that the land must remain a residential use.
No,
It actually states for
His
his own use.
own
But it is his own land.
Yeah, but so the
as a
question is whether you actually
single-family
have to-
dwelling.
I think it's saying that, okay, he can't break these 10 lots and sell the 23 to anyone else. He has to retain that. His land is retained by owner. Many times I come across that it's a single-family residence. There's not actually a brick
Residence
building there. It's a single-family residence lot at this point.
Is that under general zoning or subdivision ordinance?
I think that's just the way I've always functioned. I don't necessarily see a dwelling on that spot.
I
It's
don't
just
see a dwelling.
what the zoning recognizes it to be.
I think what it comes down to is what I mentioned before, is that the board needs to make a decision on whether you think your ordinance is trying to align with state law by referencing the state law within that section 2.3 of the ordinance, or if you are sticking to the exact language and not willing to make that interpretation. I think that's really the question here.
And I think our ordinance is coming up with that caveat because they don't want him to take that 23 acres and say, build a wall on it.
Right.
Okay, they want it to stay residential for the whole culture of the subdivision.
Mhm.
You design that subdivision the way you need it to be in the neighborhood that it's in, and you want to make sure that it stays residential and,
And note that you couldn't anyway, because it's still in the general purpose district. It still has to meet all of the zoning requirements of the general purpose district, as well as the dimensional standards for a lot.
So let's say in 5 years, he decides he wants to subdivide this.
I think that would be a modification, a subdivision modification.
So that would make it part of the subdivision.
Right, well.
Ding, 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 ding.
Well,
Right.
I mean,
But
I'm just asking a simple question. That's,
See, there is or
Yeah.
in this town, you have the contract zoning.
correct.
So I think what this is saying, that even with contract zoning, this has always got to be residential. So if someone says, yes, I'd like to put the wine tasting up in there and use the contract zoning vehicle, you can't do it. And I think that's what it's trying to do, is keep that flavor.
So what do we do?
So if this were on the plan, if you put this lot on the plan
Mhm.
with the road, we would be, and we follow the rule, the way you're interpreting the rule from the state, we would be approving a plan showing a road and a family unit to qualify, but it's not there and it's not built. Do you know what I mean?
No, I think, so you're kind of saying what his interpretation
Yes,
is,
right,
is
yeah.
that there would either need to be an existing home or a,
It'd be a no-brainer for
single-family
that,
dwelling.
if that were the case.
I am gonna focus on, even in your ordinance, the use of a single-family dwelling. It does not say unit, and the word use is there. I believe that the intent, and it's hard to say, I believe that the intent matches the intent of Maine state law in stating that the use needs to remain residential. And that it be used for his use, which is what we're proposing. It's land
for-
owned by,
For 5 years.
You
No.
could-
Yep, because in 5 years, I could buy that house.
in less than, he could sell that lot within 5 years, legally.
Not according to our zoning ordinance.
Let me reference that portion of the ordinance, but.
For a period of at least 5 years shall not be included in the company.
I believe it says, can I?
Would you want?
Are you on the subdivision ordinance there?
See, I
Oh,
interpret
that's the
this too.
regular ordinance. I'm sorry, subdivision ordinance.
Page 2.
I took it out.
If they were living there for 5 years, then this would be an issue.
But you can also,
You could make,
any building that was built in that 23 acres would have to be sprinkled, right?
Right?
Why would it have to be sprinkled?
okay, the piece.
Because it's part of the subdivision.
Because it was part, there's no sense in telling those 10 people they have to be sprinkled if this one over here doesn't.
Right.
Correct.
So you can make that a condition of approval that that lot be sprinklered even though it's not part of the
And
subdivision.
if you wanted to make sure he was going to retain it for 5 years, you can put that in there. I mean, he doesn't have to agree to it, you can negotiate, but you could definitely go there. I mean, you can say it has to be built in phases, you can do anything you want to, you know, to enhance the neighborhood that they're in.
So that, this might make my argument worse or make this more
Just give
complicated.
it,
So, depending on how you interpret it, it could go either way. So in that, the first part of that paragraph you're referring to in section 2.3 is no sale or lease of any lot or parcel shall be considered as being part of a subdivision. At the end, except where such sale or lease is to avoid the objectives of these standards. So we are
You
not.
forgot the middle of that paragraph, which says 40 acres or more in size. This is 23 and change.
Yes. No sale or lease of any lot or parcel shall be considered as part of a subdivision if such lot or parcel is 40 acres or more in size, except where such sale or lease is to avoid the objectives of these standards. This entire parcel of land is going through subdivision review by you. We are not trying to avoid the objectives of the subdivision standards by breaking this off as remaining land or retaining this as remaining land. And I will go back to the 40 acres. You also reference, again, the state standard. If you look at the state standard, I really wish I had it printed. I'm sorry. This is structured in the same exact way. And as I mentioned previously, if one does not apply, you move to the next. The 40-acre rule, that's the 40-acre exemption rule. It does not apply if we go to number 2. And number 2 of that is that you have, I just lost my train of thought entirely. I'm sorry.
So Brenda, I'm
Well, it
just
doesn't
curious,
match number,
when they,
your
if
second
they build a
paragraph doesn't
road on
match.
this for frontage, it has to be up to town standards, right? And they're not just putting a driveway in. It has to be a road that's up to town standards.
Yes, it does. And they.
And it would have to be up-
They stated that on the plan that it would be built.
Excuse me, would it have to be up to subdivision standards or town standards?
Town standards.
It's not in the subdivision.
Right.
Town standards.
I know, but we have pretty strict rules for subdivision roads too.
But I think that paragraph that Kevin just read, if you felt like they were making this proposal because they're trying in any way to circumvent subdivision regulations, then you would say absolutely not. The exception is if you're sure they're not trying to circumvent. They're making this proposal. Isn't that what it says?
So if we conditioned this that it had to be, the road had to be built to town standards. I mean, I personally feel it's part of the subdivision, but I'm willing to compromise a little bit.
It's not even a subdivision, it's a cluster. So the lot
It's a
is-
cluster
is-
subdivision, yes.
Right, so, but the lot size is too big for it to be included. Right?
Right, but
Well, and
there is a
several
clause,
other
she-
points, but yes, that's one of them.
Well, they could take this 23 acres, I mean, in theory, right, you go, or what, whatever, it's 24 acres. You could make that a part of, well, let me give you my thought process. You could put that as a cluster one and then have the remaining part of that lot be common land, couldn't you? Make it an 11th house in the subdivision? See
Well,
what I'm
no, the
saying?
density doesn't allow you to propose any more than one. So if you were gonna come in and subdivide,
No, I don't mean subdividing. If you made that an 11th lot, couldn't you take that lot as part of the cluster and then have the rest of it be common land?
yeah, that's kind of to your point earlier that we could take, but no, also because it's not just the 55,000 square foot maximum lot size that's the issue. We also don't have connectivity with the road that we're building that's attached to the rest of the subdivision.
So there's another reason why it couldn't be part of the cluster subdivision, because it
Right.
doesn't connect to the others.
And the entire reason that we proposed it this way is because again, it's all up to your ordinance really is up to interpretation, and I believed that it followed pretty closely Maine state statute, and the Maine state statute is referenced. So, and what we're proposing is legal with that thought process.
Except for some of the wording, which is up to a little bit of interpretation apparently.
The wording.
In our ordinance.
Right, on use and.
Do you have a copy with the road to put in for that?
Yeah, it's right here, it was in that.
I didn't see
It's
one.
just, it's in your little file, but here it is. Here's the road here. This is the road they're gonna put it in from South.
Probably right.
The little thing with a little turnaround. It's gonna be long enough to meet whatever the requirement.
How long is this road? I'm just curious. I can't read the numbers on it.
No, it's fine, and we have I have a zoomed in kind of version, a larger scale version, here, I think it's about 280 feet. 278, about 280, right? So this is what we're proposing.
Ah, yeah, see, there it is.
For the road,
Okay.
off of South Waterboro Road.
Yeah.
This has, I showed you the proposed contours, so you could see what we're doing. We also thank you.
There it goes.
first. Sorry.
That's okay, you can let go, I think I'm gonna set it down and just re-clip it. Actually, here, let's pull this right up. Okay, so what we're proposing under private way standards, which is the town standard, by the way, if the board wants it to be a paved town road, I don't think that it is what it is. So this is graded down at about 5%. It's pretty steep there to start, so we've made it less steep. As you can see, this is the dashed line is the existing grade. This is the proposed grade it's 6%, which starts at 5. Then we propose a swale here, so that water will come down, culvert under the hammerhead turnaround. We did design this to meet the standards of the fire department, just like the end of Brookview Drive. And then we've also provided detention and treatment of stormwater, as that is within the roadway standards that stormwater needs to be detained. So we've also updated our stormwater report to include a new study point up at this portion of the property, because that portion all drained toward the stream. So it wasn't in our analysis before, because we weren't developing up on this half of the site. So we have updated that, and with the detention of the level spreader and a forested buffer, which is what we're using for treatment, we are meeting the pre and post rates.
And you're only
That's
using that
required by
little,
ordinance.
you're really only using that little portion of the property when you get down to it, right?
Yeah.
Because the rest of it's all back,
And also,
way back.
I will note, if the concern is developing this lot, you have to cross at least 4 wetlands to get out to a place where you can put a house on this lot, and that's not being proposed here. I just want to make that clear.
It
We're
just
just
seems that
proposing the road.
Doesn't
provide
seem like
frontage.
it's, I mean, I don't know, but it seems like it's pretty expensive to put in that road so that you can have one house there, right?
Must be awful good at hunting, huh?
Our section titled 30 MSAR 4401. 4401 definitions, section 4 subdivisions,
Yep.
subsection A, number 1. Both dividings are accomplished by the subdivider who has retained one of the lots for the subdivider's own use as a single-family residence that has been the subdivider's principal residence for a period of at least 5 years, immediately preceding the second division or the division of the tract or part, this is going into 2, or parcel is otherwise exempt from this subchapter.
That's state law.
That is 4401, section 4, subsection A,
Under, what's the overall title of that?
38.
38.
30A AMRSA.
Land use standards.
Mhm.
I'm reading the first portion that you. So
Section 4 is titled subdivisions. Subdivision means the division of a tract or parcel of land into 3 or more lots within any 5-year period that begins on or after September 23rd, 1971. This definition applies whether the subdivision is accomplished by sale, lease, development, building, or otherwise. The term subdivision also includes the division of a new structure or structures on a tract or parcel of land into 3 or more dwelling units within a 5-year period, or construction or placement of 3 or more dwelling units on a single tract of land or parcel of land, and the division of the existing structure or structures previously used for commercial or industrial use within 3 or more dwelling units within a 5-year period.
Okay.
Hmm.
I think that it might be helpful if next meeting, I don't know if I want to push this topic to a public hearing, because that would
It
probably
should
a
be
nightmare.
resolved, I think.
Before
Maybe-
then.
does Southern Maine have anything to add here or not on this subject?
I did until you just read that.
So we did what?
I was going to say, in other instances that we've had subdivisions where there's land retained by the owner, there have not necessarily been a house on that extra retained land. So that's what I was going to say before you just read that. Honestly, I'd like to do some research.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's where I'm at as well, but we have dug into this and what Maine state law truly is structured in a way that if one doesn't apply here, move to the next, move to the next, move to the next. So you have to read the entire thing, and I'm sorry, you reading that out loud to me is it's a
Well-
lot to absorb. It's a lot for the board
I've
to
been doing
absorb.
this
Yeah.
for 20 years.
Well,
I understand. I just, what
We
I was
need
gonna
to do that
offer
too.
is that I think we've had a lot of discussion on it, and I would feel more comfortable if I had a PLS here, our surveyor, that's a registered surveyor, because really this is their territory. And I know what he has told me, and that's how I understand it, and that is how he interprets the law, and
anyhow, it seems to me like
That's
we
that.
we need to get this resolved one way or the other before we go to a public hearing, because you don't want to go to a public hearing until everyone's on the same page and we all agree, blah, 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 we're going to do this, this, and this, and it's all in accordance with our regulations, et cetera. And then you get public questions about this, that, and the other thing. But if we go in there and say, well, we got this extra lot over here, but you can build a road and maybe you have 20 acres here and you can do this, but it's got wetlands, it's not going to be right. We need to have it clarified in our own minds, I think, in the board's minds and hopefully the developer's mind, so we all agree on what is the most practical and legal approach to take. And then we can march down a road and see see what comments we get.
Public hearing notices have gone out.
Oh,
Yeah.
God.
well, what I was gonna offer
Yeah, that's
is,
right, you're right.
would it be
Yes, if
helpful
Sorry.
if there was a written statement from the stamping surveyor? I mean, having a stamped subdivision plan already means that what we're providing is legal, that it wouldn't, under our ethical responsibilities, you can't put a stamp on something that you believe to be illegal, of course. Again, it's all up to interpretation, so I don't know if
May
maybe it would be
17th.
helpful if I could provide a written explanation to the board between now and the 17th on this topic. I don't know if you have the availability to convene and discuss, or what, I'm trying to think of something.
The public hearing is about the cluster subdivision. I'm not sure that they have much interest in the other 23 acres, so I.
Which is part
But
of
that's
the
part of it, though.
subdivision by very definition and nature.
Well,
It can't be part of the subdivision if it's not a 1 acre lot that's included with all the others.
Okay, but
right?
either way, if the decision is that's gonna be an 11th lot, right?
Right,
Or if the decision is, yes, it can be made to be not retained by, the public hearing is still here about the division. Either
Correct.
which way it goes.
Right.
So I
Right.
think you can still go ahead with your public hearing.
Okay.
And then when you reconvene in a meeting.
Yes, there was a lot of interest at the site walk,
There was a lot of.
which was great to see.
And we really need to go forward with that portion of it. And that's really about, they're really here about the concept.
Mhm.
Some of them are about the nuts and bolts, there's no doubt about it. But I think you need to go forward with it.
well, we've already posted the public hearing. We want to go through that again. I mean, we've got the legal, we've done all
the
the
abutters have been
proper
notified now.
notifications. We don't want to do that again.
Today and next week. The certified letters went to all the abutters. I've gotten a lot of advice
Well,
back
that's,
already.
okay, good, good,
Okay.
good.
The only issue is that if we haven't come to a decision on this retained land and it affects the rest of the subdivision, it also affects our plans because we have to show the private road, and I don't want to have a public hearing and show plans that aren't complete or final. Not final, meaning that they don't have the private way off of South Waterboro Road on them yet. So I can revise our plans and resubmit 9 copies to the board. And that can be the plan set that we review at the public hearing, but I don't know if that's the right move if we haven't decided on.
Well, even after a public hearing, sometimes issues are brought up and you have to modify your plan anyway. So,
Yeah.
you know, you can
Yeah.
go with whatever plan you want. I think
The public hearing was on the preliminary plan.
it's on the preliminary
Right.
plan. So sometimes
Modifications can be made after.
sometimes you present options too. If you have objections from the public, you might have options on how to, make changes. So no one expects you to have the completed plan.
It's not expected to be
Mm.
complete, so I think it's more conceptual.
I saw another thing on this write-up that I really don't agree with,
Oh, no.
that the 10 proposed lots with an associated private gravel road,
Yeah, it's gonna be.
it's gonna be a CAD road and subdivision.
Yeah, we
It's
went
not-
over that at the sidewalk. We'll
Well, I-
propose it on the revised.
I just
plans.
wanna make sure it's understood.
I think it was proposed as gravel on one plan that I saw.
On
Yeah.
these plans it was, and then at the site walk, which we should discuss the site walk,
Yeah,
but
we'll move on to the site walk now.
sure. At the site walk, that was brought up by the road commissioner, I believe, and so we'll make that change. Do you want to say anything about the site walk before I start? I have a list of, let's go over,
It
or
was
we could use
wonderful.
your. Okay, I'll start with what you've written here, that we walked the site. We had staked the center line of the road and the front lot corners. We walked the entire center line and more. We also visited the site where the wet pond will be,
Right.
which is being
Yes.
proposed for treatment of stormwater, treatment and detention. And we did find the area of wetland impact. So everyone got to see that. And we talked about the stream, how it bisects the property, as well as access to open space, which is provided from the end of which will be provided legally from the end of the Hammerhead Road. The open space across the stream connects to a sliver of open space that kind of wraps around the 10-lot cluster subdivision. A couple things I just wanted to note. Yes, the road is being changed to a paved road, and that will be in our revised plans. We also have added, you haven't seen the plans yet, but we've also added a culvert by the request of the road commissioner at the entrance of Brookview Drive. And that's just to handle flow coming off of
Right.
Brock Road.
Yeah, I heard that part.
That all worked out. We discussed with the direct abutter to the north, Zach, and I think it's his girlfriend Hannah, that we were proposing, repairs to the culvert outfall that is currently under Brock Road. There is some erosion that's occurring in that area, and it's undercutting the bank just because it's a lot of flow coming out of a 5-foot diameter pipe. So we are proposing some in-stream or in wetland, I guess technically it's not the stream channel, in-stream work there to armor that and to reduce further erosion, especially considering we're going to be building a road within 40 feet of that area. So we want to make sure that that is solid. And that is being permitted under Maine DEP NRPA standards. And why I mentioned Zach and Hannah is because we discussed working on their property to do those repairs. So there will be an easement that you'll see on our subdivision plan for that work, and then further maintenance in perpetuity for maintaining, the boulders that we're installing on their property. I think that pretty much covers my recollection of what was discussed.
One of my concerns, and I expressed at the site walk, is the owner's access to the land in common, which we walk by the potential retention pond and we walk down to the wetland to where there's currently a homemade bridge cross, which to anyone's eye is going to become an attractive nuisance, which could damage the wetland. So by the creation of this and not providing a approved access to the back lot across the wetland, you're inviting damage to the wetlands by the homeowners.
Okay, so two pieces there. I know that there was talk of the bridge, pedestrian plywood crossing, that was that it was unsafe and could become a liability.
Mhm.
So there is the idea that maybe it needs to be removed for safety reasons. But then I think what you're saying is that if there isn't an actual physical means of access to the open space, that people will be walking through the stream and associated
Walking through
wetlands.
ATVs, dirt bikes, mini bikes, snow machines.
Yeah.
Um,
So what I would offer there is that, as I said at the site walk, anything we do within 75 feet of the stream has to be permitted. So that bridge has been there for a long time. It was not installed by the current owner of the land. I believe that you could take it out because it was not permitted in the first place. So we could, if the board feels that it's necessary to take the bridge out, then we could make that a condition of approval that it needs to be removed. Going back to the other side of that argument, now you don't have access. That is going to be up to the homeowners association to address. I mean, we can propose signage on the plans stating that, pedestrian activity in a stream or a wetland is not prohibited. It's not considered impact to a wetland or stream for somebody to walk across a body of water. The impact comes from construction, comes from grading within the limits of that wetland or within the wetland itself, constructing a structure in a wetland area. So I think that that's up to the HOA to manage, but if the board is concerned about it, again, we can add some conditions of approval surrounding that to the plan. I don't know about the enforcement of that, though. I can't really speak to that once.
I think at the sidewalk, I came in on the hind end of that conversation. I didn't understand it then. I don't understand it now. Are you saying that the public has a right to cross that stream?
No, I'm saying hypothetically, I buy lot 1,
Okay,
knowing that there's another 40 acres out in the back that is part of land in common. I have 4 children, they grow up, I buy them ATVs. We got land to play in. We got common land. I'm gonna go down by the retention pond, go across this nice little meadow there, go bump through the stream and access the land.
I think still that would be managed by the homeowners association. I bet I know what Josh is about to say, and that on the abutting parcel, and if this isn't it, feel free, of course, to speak, but on the abutting parcel that's owned by York County Soil and Water District, I believe there are ATV trails that go through there and up into a portion of the open space, where the open space is proposed.
It was through conservation land, but.
Yeah.
I manage homeowner associations for a living.
Mhm.
No one allows ATVs. You can't afford the insurance to have ATVs on there. So it's gonna have to be in the HOA laws that they're not prohibited to be written in the HOA.
And those bylaws
Nobody's
will
gonna
be,
give an HOA insurance for ATV.
those bylaws will also do have to be provided before the final plan is approved. So you would have a chance to review those.
That's, I see a number of HOAs with large tracts of land. That part of the proposed plan shows not public, but the access and trail maintenance and the trails through it. So before the planning even takes off.
Yeah.
The use is restricted and here's where the pathways are gonna be. I see it all the time.
Yeah, I've worked on a few subdivisions that are like that. I've worked on some subdivisions where the planning board has required that public access trails be provided. In this case, and also I wanted to note that if there is some connection that your development is obstructing or changing in some way, a lot of boards will ask the subdivider or the applicant to create a connection elsewhere so that trail can be maintained for ATV use. I don't think that that's the case here. And I also think that the main goal, at least Maine DEP's main goal, is to reduce the impact to natural resources and providing a means of access for connection from the developed area, I think, well, I know would require further permitting and I don't think we could explain avoidance and minimization of a natural resource by stating that we're putting a snowmobile trail through it.
Okay. So do we, I guess the question is, do we need to, seems like this access issue should be covered by the HOA. That's what it sounds like to me. And do we care one way or the other whether they leave that, I mean, from a purpose of approving this subdivision in accordance with the rules as written, do we care whether or not they have that plywood piece of junk?
Well, that's not our liability.
Yeah, so I mean, is that our business or do we just say, hey, it's there? If the HOA wants to leave it there, good luck. If they don't, if they want to take it out, it's on them. We could, do we need to put in a requirement for signs or can we say that's on the HOA? They have to operate under state laws. And then, I mean, we're trying to look at, is this project meeting our subdivision regulations? If it does, it sounds like Southern Maine is pretty much on board with it. Maybe Hannah has some comments, but I would think we should just go forward on this thing. And the other issue of the common land, we can try to resolve and maybe.
I've got an idea for that. If they want the common land, I don't see why we can't condition it that the road's built to town standards. And if they're gonna subdivide it, they have to come back as a subdivision.
Could do that. Could do that.
I mean,
That's
that's what
required
I would
under
do to
state-
compromise, yes.
Yeah.
That's required under state law as well.
Right.
If he ever wanted to change that land in any way, he would have to amend this subdivision plan in order to do
We
that.
could put that as a condition then, and that would make it legal. It would be registered in York County. And maybe that would resolve this issue. I mean, there's
I mean,
too
I
many.
really think it's part of the subdivision, but I think a compromise is fair.
Yeah,
I don't know what the rest of the board thinks. I mean,
Same.
yeah, I agree with you, especially the way the subdivision is
Paul?
located and with all that.
Bill?
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That would move it forward then. We can vote at the end of this thing if we have to.
So does that sound fair to you? I mean,
Yeah.
Okay.
What about-
I think that, yeah, I mean.
What do you think?
I think it meets, I truly believe, not for the benefit of Josh, but
Well,
I
anyway,
truly,
we know who paid your salary. You don't have to go too far.
yeah. I truly believe that your ordinance is intended to follow state law, and I believe that this is
We-
meeting state law.
We love to follow state law.
So we're good to move on then and
I believe so.
I hope
And
so.
what do you mean by move on that?
for the public hearing? I
The
mean,
public hearing, yeah.
like I said, I think that's a fair thing. I mean,
Yeah, sure, I think it is too. It seems like it provides the right protections. To me, it sounds insane to build a private road for one house, but if that's what the rules are, we gotta follow the rules to create the road frontage. If that's the way it is. But if the applicant wants to build his home of his dreams there on that 20-some acres, and he put in his private road, it has his hammerhead turnaround on it and all that stuff, goes to town standards, as long as it's in the conditions that it's recorded at York County, go forth and do your thing. That's my opinion.
Kelly, you agree with it?
I'm just,
I know, but
I just think it's not a subdivision. I mean, that lot is not a part of the subdivision.
well, it would be a lot easier if you wouldn't have sold the other piece out of it, because then
right,
Well,
you
that's,
could keep that and,
Yeah,
that's water that's
right.
gone
I
down the
understand
river,
that.
so.
I see it as part of the subdivision, I see it as the other law, I
yeah, the
would
lot.
compromise with having the private road, which would bring it up to a legal conforming lot. Um,
And if the other subdivide it, they come back under the subdivision.
It's just two places it's referenced single-family residential use.
Okay.
That's, and it's in the statute that is referenced, and she's referring to twice owner occupied single-family residence.
Does it say owner occupied? Or,
I think we've beaten that
okay.
horse into the ground and
Yeah,
shot it
it's
two
just-
times.
Kicked it
I
a few
mean,
times.
Yeah.
My personal opinion aside, I'm just reading the written word. That's what I'm reading.
Do we need to vote on this or what? How are we gonna go on this thing here?
Well, I think,
So
actually,
as far as to proceeding, let's proceed.
I think, well, sorry, what I would ask is that, maybe a motion be made for the conditions of approval that are gonna be required, so I can put them on the,
Nah,
I thought that this
nah,
plan was gonna be
No.
voted on to move on, I thought this plan had to be voted on to move on to final.
We did vote that the application was
complete.
complete.
You voted that. it's
Right.
complete, so.
So
we're
really,
fine.
we don't have to vote again on it.
So this is working towards the final.
Okay.
right?
Everyone's a little bit different.
Right.
The condition, the final approval should contain the conditions. Now, it may be at the public hearing, somebody comes up with something that says, hey, blah, 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 and we say, okay, that's a good point. We can address that by adding a condition. So then you'll get, when this is all finished, if it goes through, you'll get a notice of decision signed by the chairman, and it'll be registered. It has to be registered at the York County Registry of Deeds. It will contain all the conditions there. But it's not to say that if we said, okay, here's the conditions right tonight, we could still add conditions until this thing is finally approved. We could add 10 more conditions if they were legitimate, of course, but.
Yes, okay, I'm sorry, can we just review what the two conditions are that you had brought forth?
Okay, that the road would be up to town standards for the lot. And if you decide to subdivide that lot, it'll come under the subdivision standard.
So the land,
The 23 acres.
yeah, the land retained
Point, whatever.
by
Yeah.
owner.
Extra land. Sounds like. I see Hannah is shaking her head. Yes, I hope that's what she's saying.
I would shake my head, but that's, I think, what we had come to. And that it is more just as far as due diligence to put that second condition on there, because that's just how it works.
Mhm.
If
Right.
they ever, since that extra lot, whatever, 23 acres, however we're calling it right now, retained by the owner, is ever subdivided, that has to come back to the planning board as an amended plan.
Right, because
Regardless of whether you put that condition on there. it's
by
just
then
an
all the
extra
people could have
assurance.
changed and.
Yeah,
But
the
if
whole
that's-
world could be
Since it's
different.
on this approved plan as that split, if it ever changes, it needs to come back for amended subdivision. But I
But-
think it's good due diligence to put it on here, just saying.
And then if somebody then reviews the notice of decision that's recorded, they'll see that and it'll jump out of them, hopefully.
When you say subdivided, would that be a new subdivision or divide within the existing subdivision again?
Kind of both.
Amending this subdivision.
That's,
Yes, you would be amending this subdivision.
We'd be amending the subdivision.
Yes, but you can subdivide that lot.
So the owner's lot is still a part of which subdivision?
It is, it is on this subdivision plan, because this is when the split is happening for these 23 acres. But if that 24 acre lot is ever wished to be subdivided in the future, it would be an amendment to this subdivision plan, but a new subdivision would be created on that parcel.
But it would be lot number 11, 12, 13.
No, it's still gonna
It
be,
would start all over.
no, that, I believe, I mean, you'd have to ask the assessor, but I believe that that lot would be, these lots could be labeled, I think, Zach and Hannah's lot was labeled 12-1A, the out parcel. So these would be B, C, D, E, whatever, until you get to 10. And then the remaining land would be just 12-1.
But
Because
I was
it's-
talking about if you decide at some point to subdivide a couple of lots off that 23 acres, it would still be part of this, it would be a modification to this subdivision, and it would be lot 11 and 12. I think you're talking map and lot numbers. I'm not.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm talking, right now you've got 1 through 10.
I don't think so, no. It would be a new,
Ran through the association at some point, so it no longer would belong.
yeah, it's not part of the
So when the
subdivision.
subdivision is done, I have to relinquish
The open space, yes.
the open space and all of that.
Right.
So
Yeah, I'm
how would I
talking about
still be?
23 acres.
So the plan, this plan would need to be amended if that parcel were subdivided. But a new subdivision would be created from the remaining land parcel. But because it's shown on this plan still,
Makes sense.
Yeah, so it's,
it's still shown on this plan and it would be changing in the future. So this plan would have to be amended and then a new subdivision.
So this would show at York County as the original subdivision, I can't remember the name,
Brookview Street.
as amended with
yes.
whatever what you're adding to it.
Yeah, and I don't even think, I mean, this goes into, my surveyor would really have to answer this question, but it goes into, I know on a lot of amended plans, it's just land subdivided under,
Well, I mean, it seems like we're into conjecture. It's a numbering issue.
Yeah.
Somebody will figure it out, hopefully, if they decide to do
and we're not
that.
proposing to subdivide the parcel, so.
Yeah, and it's,
Not yet.
and if,
Not yet.
if the applicant in the future wants to go through the process of doing this, and that's on the applicant to come up with a new plan which shows that and then references, and then at that time, the numbering hopefully would be conforming with whatever the rules are. And I don't know what the rules are, but somebody, I would check with York County Registry. Somebody there knows the rules, so we follow the rules. That's all we do. Seems to me. I think it's a moot point myself, the numbering. Personally, I mean, I don't see what's,
But I think what Hannah and I were saying is that your condition number 2 is really redundant because they have to come back.
well, I
for-
still think it's a good idea. It seems to me
Put it
that
on
would,
there, yeah.
Yeah,
Put it on there.
it's totally fine to Put it on there. I think we're just acknowledging that that is already the law, that they have to do that. But it's totally fine to put it on, and for whoever's reading it to see that, if they don't know.
and
That's
plus I
the
think
law.
it gives a butter some idea that there are some conditions that they have to go through.
Yeah.
And rather than just say, oh, it's a law, they'll have to come back. Well, if I was in a butter, I might want to see it on the notice of decision. That way,
Totally
it's there.
I think too, in how it's worded, the land retained, I have here, the land retained by owner must obtain subdivision approval in order to further subdivide. I think subdivision approval is vague enough does that mean an amendment to this plan or a brand new subdivision plan or both? That could be decided in the future depending on the situation. Is that fair?
Yes.
Yes.
And just for the first one,
Yeah, this is
semantics.
Mm.
The road must meet town roadway standards, but I think I'm going to specifically reference the title of the town of Lyman. I think it's the town of Lyman roadway
yes.
standards. That's what you're
Yeah.
referring to,
Yeah,
right?
the road
Yeah,
ordinance, yes.
subdivision roadway standards.
Well, not subdivision, but
That would be town.
The
Just
town,
roadway
town
standards in
road
general.
standards.
Sign construction.
Yeah, that one.
That- Yeah.
The pink one.
got it.
One.
They're all PDFs to me.
Thank you, Julie.
Yeah, thank you, Julie.
Pink one.
Kendra, I can send you the wording for that second
Great.
condition, for another one that essentially will get you.
That sounds great. So we'll work on that.
All right, let's just look at there.
Did you find if the preliminary plan needs to be approved or?
So, every town is different in how they do this, so I have to read it. But it says,
What says, what are you reading from, please?
subdivision regulation 6.19. Within 60 days after acceptance by the planning board, the planning board shall take action to give preliminary approval with or without modifications to disapprove or disapprove such preliminary plan.
Oh, here it is. Okay, within 60 days of acceptance.
I don't know if that was her place.
So also the preliminary application is separate from the final application, so I think we have to have an approval on this application in order to submit the final application.
One of the things I was talking with the road commissioner during the site walk, we did,
60 days.
and I don't know if it's on these plans, the sight lines coming up and down the road.
Sure, yeah.
What the distance is.
Yeah, we got.
Within the application, we provided a traffic memo
Okay,
that addresses site distance and traffic generation.
Okay.
Trip generation from here. We are meeting the site distance on both sides, but if you'd like to see it on the plan, I can add it.
just
Okay.
someone, if I thought of it, the road commissioner thought of it, someone in the public may think, will probably think about it.
And he spoke to me about trimming back coming out on the left-hand side.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Take it back to the public line
Yep.
and trim that all the way out.
Safety.
Yeah, sure, that's stated
We're
in
probably
the
gonna have
traffic
kids
memo as well.
come in and wait for the bus, so we want them to be safe.
So in theory, you accept or approve, I think the words are used interchangeably in your ordinance, but correct me if I'm wrong. You accept the preliminary plan, hold the public hearing, and then review and approve the final.
Right.
Another question, do we also need maybe a condition of approval if this plan if the plan that we submitted does not show the retained land as correctly labeled, it's still labeled as a back lot right now. And we are not showing the private way on this plan. Could we approve this as the preliminary plan with the condition that we add those items to the final plan?
Does it show the roads a tad on this plan?
Does it show it what?
Not on that.
On the one they submitted.
Not on the
Oh.
one we submitted 2 weeks
Right.
ago.
Right.
So we need one with the cross sections up to standard.
Yeah, so the ordinance reads, the planning board shall take action to give preliminary approval with or without modifications. So you're saying, we approve this plan, granted you do X, Y, Z things for the final approval. That's typical.
All right.
There
we go. Okay, so what do we need, a motion?
Yep.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the preliminary plan for Brookview Estates as submitted with the following conditions. Now, somebody please repeat the conditions we want to have occur, and then we can vote on that. Is that okay?
I would say with the following modifications.
With the following modifications,
Yes,
amend my
conditions are for the
motion.
final approval, but yes.
I'm sorry?
I said the conditions are for the final.
Okay, with the following modifications to the preliminary plan.
Yes.
And what are those modifications we want to see now? Don't everybody
Only
speak?
road to the owner's retained lot be built to town standards,
Okay,
town alignment standards, excuse me.
Roadway standards.
Right, and it's going to be on the plan.
Yes, we
The
can
revision.
add that as the second condition or not condition, modification if you'd like, but, or we can address it after, but.
If it
That
says-
a private way be added to provide proper frontage to the retained land.
Right.
okay, and then private, so we got the road, that's the whatever, Brockview Road or whatever you're calling it.
Brookview.
Brookview, I'm sorry. That's got to be the town standards, and then the second was that the private way,
South Waterboro.
what's that one, what are we calling that?
That is a private way.
Oh, privately, I'm sorry.
Private way with the proper frontage
Private
for the
way.
retained land, right?
Private
Yeah, I
way
had
with
it-
proper,
Built to town roadway standards,
or-
town of Lyman roadway standards.
Yeah.
Proposed retaining law be brought up to legal standards with the presentation of a private road. With the
is there any way to make it more complicated?
Oh, yes, I can.
No, don't, please. So, we got the first one was the road,
Julie
we're
will
talking
fix
about the
it.
access, the main road there.
After I watch the-
to town of Lyman Center. Second one is the private way.
Right.
The, with proper frontage to blah, blah, blah. What's the rest of the words there? Simple. Keep it simple.
Do you want me to read what I've written?
Yes,
Yes.
please.
Okay. Sorry. A private way be added off of South Waterboro Road to provide proper frontage to land retained by owner.
Nice.
Sounds good.
I,
Are there any others that we want to add to this motion?
we had that the land retained by owner must obtain subdivision approval in order to further subdivide, but I think that would just be a condition on the
That'll be a
final
condition on
plan.
the final.
So we'll ignore that
We're
one.
talking
Also,
preliminary here, so, okay. What
also
else?
show
Any
site-
others?
show site distance on the revised plan set.
Revised plan should show site distance, line of sight distance for, that would be on Brock Road, wouldn't it?
Brookview Drive, Brock Road
Drive.
intersection,
Okay.
yes.
That's right.
It's gonna be 450 feet at 45 miles an hour.
Okay. We got these now, show, site view.
And I would like you to show your subdivision road is tarred.
Yes,
Well, make
that's a
sure you do
good, that's a
that.
good point. We
That-
will, well, we
You can make a note.
We said that the road must meet town of
Town
Lyman
standards.
roadway standards, and in that
So that
standard, it
addresses
says that because
Must be a
it's,
tar road.
because it's accessing a subdivision, it has to be paved.
Right.
Is that,
That's
That's
the
fine.
first
is
one.
that fine?
That's the first one again.
We can add it as a condition.
Well, I just,
It's already
if
changed
you
in
put
our
it on, if you
code.
put it on the plan, people will understand that it's gonna be tarred.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't read our roadway standards.
Nobody reads anything.
So do you want it as a condition on the final plan that the road must be paved?
Well, it's gonna be on a final plan, yes.
Well, it will be shown on the final plan and will show notes, and we also have the cross-section details of the road that will also show pavement. So it will be on there in several.
Okay, but we're just getting we have three conditions so far, I hope, Julie, for the approval of the preliminary plan, right? So any more conditions for the preliminary plan, modifications for the preliminary plan, for the motion here, that's still sitting open.
Our plans, as you have them now, still currently say gravel road, so you could make it a modification that we change it to a paved road.
I thought we already did that, didn't we say? hit
But
the
her
road?
plans
You
say
did it the
gravel
sidewalk.
road.
Make a fourth one to say that the preliminary plan will be changed to show that it's a paved road as opposed to a gravel road. Is there anything else?
I just want to bring up, it was mentioned at the site walk by one of the residents, and I've never seen it before, but they wanted the proposed footprint of the houses. That is not within your purview or our purview to do a condition, but I just wanted the public to know that we were hearing them and have addressed it here. I've never seen
Thank
that on any plans I've ever.
No,
Yeah.
they show the area for the building. Okay, are there any other modifications on this thing? That's what just
No, I think we're good.
I think we're
Good.
Okay, so do we have those written enough to be able to probably try to write them down?
I haven't written any of them down.
Oh, good luck.
I can scan my
She's gonna
my
watch the
notes
video
over
right
here.
now.
She listens to that.
She said she's-
I listened to the video, yes, please email
Okay.
that to me.
Okay,
Maybe we pretty when I
that's
type
that's the motion.
I'll second that. Any discussion? No, all in
No.
favor?
Aye. Okay, good luck. And I hope you enjoy those 24 acres and your turnaround and your hammerhead and all that other stuff you're gonna put in. I'm sure you'll start on that
Can't wait to
tomorrow.
pay to construct that road.
This is not the hardest one you guys have done.
No, no, I think, but you never know. I mean, at the, hope the public hearing, we get good representation. And there may be some additional questions which need to be resolved, and then we could go forth and try to do that.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I appreciate you sticking with us and working through some of the kinks and the nuances with that.
No,
So
that's what we're supposed to do.
thank you.
Maybe, does she have anything else she wants to say?
What's that?
Does she have anything else she wants to say?
Anna, you have anything you want to say? You all set?
I'm good.
Thanks for
Okay.
your,
Thanks for your expertise.
yeah, thanks for your write-up and everything. Appreciate it, taking the time to do this. Are you coming to our workshop later? Aren't you, well, you work for Southern Maine Planning and Development, right?
Yes.
CJ's doing it.
The LD 2000.
Yeah.
That's all they did.
Oh, you're not going to honor us with your presence for that?
Not that time.
Sorry.
Probably be in some other town.
Thank you for coming.
You guys are going to have a lot of fun at that place.
Yeah, well, we're looking forward to heck all over that one.
That extra 20 acres that
So-
could fall
so
under LD
Does that mean
2003.
it's 24 acres when he builds his own house? He can
Well,
build
it's
a
the
second
rest of
house?
the house.
It's gonna be wild, but I think we're smart to be ahead of the
Comes
curve.
into effect in July,
Doing
so.
one way or the
Brenda,
other.
we had some discussion on subdivision regulations, or have you had enough?
Do I really want to go there? But I kind of do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Okay, we're gonna continue with our meeting, so thank you. Thank you for coming. You can stay if you'd like.
In sending out the notices for the sidewalk and the public hearing, in the subdivision ordinance, oh, I have it open, that, what do we do with that?
I just closed mine.
I did too.
Okay,
Structures.
5.1, it's on page 10.
Here we go, Joanne.
As we know, subdivision planning is pretty much regulated by the state of Maine. They do have some in May, but most of it is, so especially notification, and we have a public hearing shall be held following the acceptance of the preliminary plan, which we did. And it says when the public hearing is ordered by the planning board, interested parties will be notified in 10 days. That's all I see anywhere, whereas the state of Maine says it has to be in a newspaper 7 days prior, twice. And that, it doesn't, I mean, interested parties, what does that mean? I mean, in our world, it's butters. But, you know, is it immediate butters or is it butters within 500 feet? So I think this really needs to be worked on, and it just occurs to me, I mean, that's really important.
Aha. You fed right into an email that I sent out. I'm not sure I covered subdivisions in there, but I sent out an email for discussion, and I did not intend or do not care. I hope we do not discuss it tonight. I'll put it bluntly. But it lists all the requirements that it's been bothering me for quite a long time, actually. That, there's a typo here because the last page is incorrect. I mean, it's missing a couple of items on it. I'm sorry, I just noticed it when I was looking at it earlier, but there's a conflicting requirements for notification. I made up a table and you got it in your emails. You should have it, but you get a lot of stuff. And I think you're absolutely right. I think that we need to try to go through, and my recommendation is in the short term, and I don't need to discuss this tonight, but that we come up with a set of restrictive requirements that we agree on, that we do the notifications at this time frame, and we put it all in one spot so that we can look at it and not have to go back and say, gee, now this is a subdivision, we got to go there, or this is if it's an ordinance change, a whole set of revisions there, but it's not that, it's just that the darn state laws too, they don't conflict, but they're different. So some say you have to have, for some types of things, you have to have 2 notices in a newspaper of general, whatever, record.
General circulation.
Circulation.
That's not the report.
That's not the report.
Not by
That
definition.
pushes us to the Portland Press Herald typically.
What we do is we put it in the Portland Press Herald Sunday Classifieds because that seems to be the most reasonable dollar-wise. And I don't know of anybody that
Nobody
that.
reads it.
But then we put it twice in the Reporter because that's what people read. So-
Yeah, so we should try
help
to.
save, but serve our people. So-
But anyway, what I'm saying is, and the reason I sent this out was, and again, it needs to be checked by other board members because there may be errors due to mental difficulties with the person who wrote it up, which is me. But I think we ought to set our stuff in one place, have a list, and be more restrictive than the ordinances require, but keep it as much as possible common, and allow the 20 days notice, for example, to by certified mail, because that's what the lawyer recommended in one case that we got bounced back on. So there's nothing that says we cannot be more restrictive. We just want to meet the requirements.
And you are more restrictive because the state law says you may vote to have
Right.
a public hearing. So you're more restrictive because you say you will have a public hearing. It's just that, and you know, if you don't do these notices often, you forget, is it immediate about
exactly
it?
what
Is it
happens.
500
Right.
feet or is it twice? And if you miss one beat, it puts the whole thing open to challenge.
We've had that experience.
And you've had that experience. So I just wanted to point out, and it only came up because Julie was doing the notices and I asked her something about something. And she
Right.
said, and just because I happen to know, because I've done a lot of subdivisions, and I
Right.
said, we've got to fix that.
Yeah, we
We
got to fix it.
really do.
Yep.
So I was hoping, along what Dawn is saying, that everybody will kind of look through this and mark up when it doesn't give our office direct instructions on 7 days, 10 days, 14 days, whatever it is. And I would love it if we could come up with a chart.
Well, and anyway, you have it electronically. I will note that unfortunately, the copy that, maybe it's the way it came out in the PDF or something, but there's the first two items in that last page have apparently been cut off.
I didn't know that.
But, because it starts with 3, 4, and 5. And anyhow, and I'm not saying it's brilliant, it's not brilliant, it's just trying to put things in one place. And again, it needs to be checked by other board members. So that way, hopefully we get it right, and then we just because there's no advantage, in my opinion, even though it might be helpful, potentially helpful to a applicant to go forth and not meet all the requirements, because we set ourselves up for a redo. And the redos they just take so much more time. And we don't want to do that.
Can I just say before we move on, Julie and I did the ZBA meeting last night.
Yes.
It's been an interesting week. She's been doing a lot of notifications, that's
Yeah.
for sure. And it went well.
Good.
And as I was sitting here tonight watching, the conversation that went on here, it really pleases me. Both boards have just really been very, what do we want to say? Very helpful to the applicant. And when you compromise the way you did, it's so pleasant to work with that. It really is. And we appreciate it. We just wanted to say that.
Well,
thank
you.
They kind of had to compromise last night too. It really is something to watch. It really is.
It's a fair thing to do,
Right.
as long as it's not too outrageous.
You still gotta cover yourself.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Yeah.
Things have to be
Go ahead,
mentioned,
John.
stated, and then we work from the stated.
On that positive note, I'd like to say something else. I did go to the select board meeting on Monday night. They did finally vote to, they didn't vote to not put our contract zoning requested change on the town warrant for vote at town meeting. It voted 2-2. So basically, they had to vote to put it on. So the 2-2 vote puts it back, so it's not going on. So this was the third time, and I'll say this for our thousands of people on the audience here. So that means the contract zoning wording will stay the same as currently in the zoning ordinance, and it appears that the next chance to change that would be November of 24, if it went through the requirements of the new charter, which involves the ordinance review committee, which is not a bad thing to do, and getting additional people to sign off on it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that went through. There was some other discussion, which I'll mention just quickly. One select person said that he thought that I was prejudiced or words along that line. And I want to explain to the board members here and also for the many people who are watching us on Zoom or, on YouTube, that the planning board has a set of bylaws that are, and I looked, they're on the town website under planning board. If you read those, there's a section in there on bias, a section on conflict of interest. It describes a procedure that should be followed by an applicant if they feel that any board member cannot fairly judge their application. And we had a case of that in the past, and we didn't have any rules, so we changed the bylaws to cover that. So it's in there, and basically what it says is that the applicant should submit written reasons why they feel a board member is prejudiced or cannot consider their application fairly. And then the board would vote on whether or not, but also it gives time for the board member to make their comments or prepare their comments, and then it's considered and voted on before it moves forward. So there's a process in there. And also there's a process, there's a comment on there about conflict of interest. I personally have no conflict of interest with any project that we've addressed in I've been on the board since 2008, I think, November of 2008, thanks to Morris St. Clair, who recommended that I try this. Anyway, God bless you, Morris. But in any case, I'm just saying that it's in there, and if anyone thinks there are issues, I would hope they would come forth. And I hope that if any board member has conflicts on any projects, that they recuse themselves. It's up to the individual, and if anybody wants to bring it up from the public, then we have to sit there and consider it properly and take it seriously. So I'm
Okay.
not saying you can't just blow it off. Let's see, what else was I gonna say? Probably shouldn't say anything else, but, and so that's it for that one. And I don't think contract zoning is going anywhere as far as the wording that's in the current ordinance. Oh, I know. I think Julie made a comment at the meeting on Monday night, and I don't want to paraphrase what you said, not Julie, but Brenda, saying basically some towns have done away with, or either they tried contract zoning.
They're talking about it. I have,
Wanted to get your comments.
I have a feed that I get every day. It's called Moose Tracks. And
Moose, that sounds like an ice cream.
some days I get 20, 25. Someone will throw out an idea that they had and what do you think of it? Or this has happened, I don't know how to handle it, how have you handle it? It's really excellent. And they've really been agonizing over contract
Yeah.
zoning. I'm going to be upfront. I don't care for contract zoning. I feel that a zone was created for a reason,
Right.
and it was assigned certain uses for a reason. And if a use shouldn't be in that zone, then it shouldn't be in that zone, or else change the zone, one or the other. I think it's subjective. and
Could be,
I
can
think-
be.
And I think it can be
Little bit.
very political, because even perception is everything.
Mhm.
And things can be perceived differently by different people. And I think that your ordinance gets very weakened with contract zoning, and I wouldn't be sorry to see it go. I really wouldn't.
Well, the thing is, we're in inclusive zoning versus exclusive zoning. In an exclusive zoning, the use of contract zoning would not necessarily be required. But with the inclusive, that which is not specifically stated as approved is automatically disapproved. Or we would have to go through the whole process to change the ordinance to put in another allowed use,
Mhm.
which would be needed for the entire zone. Where with contract zoning, we can say, wait a minute, this kind of makes sense. We're gonna allow it here, but it will not run with the property.
I understand. It's just,
It does leave you open sometimes, though,
With some of the wording that we want,
especially now.
That
But
we want to change.
right, we
yes.
want to get rid of that open end.
I mean, I see your point. I see your
Oh,
point.
yeah.
and I tried to find some of the correspondence that I was gonna share with you, and I couldn't find it. I saved it. When I find it, I'll forward
But I'm
it.
just looking, in order to do away with contract zoning, there's a very strong potential that we would have to add 300 terms, definitions to meet the potential from this and that, and this and
And
that.
see, I don't agree. No town that I have ever worked in had contract zoning. It's the first time I experienced it.
Oh, really?
Really?
It was, and, I mean, your land use table has to be very comprehensive.
Yes.
But-
Yeah.
But that's the meat of the whole thing, and it's usually very well thought through. So to me, your ordinance is usually your definitions in your land use table.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've seen some things in here that I think it was called, like, as general as a commercial use, so that can cover a lot of things. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be explicit, your land use table. But you're right, things are coming up all the time that won't be in there.
Well, we've used
Yeah,
it 3
we-
times so far, and that means we've recommended approval, and there's 3, as I remember, there's 3 contracts that were signed by the select board.
Yes.
And in one case, it was an existing business which was not meeting the requirements, and that was basically gave a venue for them to take that existing business and make it legal under the town of Lyman zoning. There was no significant opposition to that. And then the other 2 were businesses that were approved in one zone, but not authorized in the zone that they wanted to go into. So it was helpful certainly to the businesses, but I see your point there, and it's just that, you know, you can make 2 sides of it. But then if you have something, and our current wording has just got some weasel words in there that probably shouldn't be in there, my opinion. That's just my opinion. And that's what we were trying to
We
fix.
actually had one we voted down.
Yes, we had one that was voted down, and then that was an issue, and it was mainly a case of density, extreme density of housing in an area in the residential zone. So that was an issue, and there's a strong opposition to that by townspeople. So, but contract zoning does allow you, does get you into problems. And for some, it can get you into problems and issues. It does give flexibility, but that's a discussable, I mean,
I was gonna say, that's why we have public hearings, and it can take so much longer because the public comes in and expresses strongly opposed or in favor of, yes, we think this is a good idea, we hate this idea.
But I tell you, honestly, if we didn't have contract zoning, it would make the life of the planning board easier in a lot of ways. And in the shoreland, the old famous words, as far as practicable, that makes an issue. So, but the words are what they are right now. And we have to live by
Subjective,
those. Anyway,
objective decisions.
Did everybody get
Yes.
to read the April 19th, 2023 meeting minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to accept them as written.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Sorry,
Aye.
Go ahead, Joe.
Joe's got
Nope.
a change. Actually, my apologies. Number 3, just the date expired on 10/19, then it's a period as opposed to another slash.
Well,
Just
the years.
small things, I'm sorry. It's just-
Draw a line,
Because it's a legal document, just amend that.
Do you want to just correct it on the original as it comes by you?
That's right. Sorry.
Just hand draw a slash.
Yeah, we'll just do it on the original.
Okay, all in favor?
As
Joe's
amended.
correction?
Aye.
Yeah,
As amended.
good job. Yeah, I'm slacking off. Got my-
My mind must have been.
Today is the, today's the third.
Yeah, she goes through this about 3 times.
You're taking over
Worse
my
than my
nitpicking job.
reading.
Yes. Sometimes I turn
Okay,
it
the
up
third
loud
to
for
see.
repetition.
It's the third.
The third, it is the
Yes,
third,
big
okay.
third, 5-3.
I'm losing my mind. Not much food.
On our next meeting, we have a public hearing,
Yes.
and we'll schedule them if not after the public hearing.
I think next time we'll have a site plan review.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's another best practical location.
Do we have a sidewalk coming up too?
Wednesday, next week, 5:30.
Yeah, I'll pick up camera, I guess.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, the next 207 sidewalk.
Yes.
Could I ask one other question before, I'm sure.
Go
we
ahead,
have
Dog.
break. Okay, as far as other pending projects, we have that subdivision over on Kennebunk Pond Road. We're still waiting on them. We're not holding them up, are we? Or
They're
anything?
holding us.
Okay.
On the old Kennebunk Road, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the other one was still the Green Acres one, medical
We took it
marijuana.
off.
Oh, that's off. Okay, but we aren't holding that project up. The planning board's not holding that project up. Okay, Are there any other ones that are hanging around?
There was the,
Martino,
Oh, Austin.
Catherine's.
then we had Roy
With the
Family
Commons,
Stair to
yeah.
camp.
The
We're still waiting on them
24th
too.
is that meeting with Southern Maine.
Right.
That's
right there, right. That's why you're up this way.
And that's
30.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's on them. That's not on us, right? So we're not holding anybody up. on
Right, he
anything.
was supposed to, we
Good.
did a sidewalk on that one too. We did.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure I wasn't missing things. So it sounds like the planning board, for the record, all those thousands of people, is not holding up any applicants who want to come forward.
I won't be able to make the site walk on the 10th, that's one of my other meeting nights,
Okay.
I won't be there. Did you get the email with those mapping
I
links?
did.
Did you have them before? Or
No, I looked through really quickly. Thank you for that. I meant to say that.
some of them are fun sites.
Yeah.
You can find
Well, I'll
some
make a
stuff.
motion that would close the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The site that has,
I'm messing around. I'm sorry.
All right.
it goes way back.